ladies and gentlemen, I'm Councillor Moyo from Ward 26. I happen to also be chairing the Finance Committee. I'm the third in command hierarchy yama councillors. So now Deputy Mayor engekho kumbe umayor engekho ichogonya libamba. Thank you. Okay, allow me to welcome and introduce our esteemed Mayor, Senator David Coltart. He was once a senator from my constituency. He was once an MP. He was once a Minister of Education. We know he did well during his tenure as the Minister of Education. There is no doubt that he certainly is going to do even better as the Mayor of the city of Bulawayo. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to take this opportunity to introduce Senator Councillor David Coltart, his Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moyo, and good morning to you all. When I walked in here and I saw Paul Tembe-Nyati speaking, I was reminded of two words beginning with the letter F. The first is favourite, because he is one of my favourite people. But the second word is fear, because I've known him for a long, long time, and although he's a very nice man, he's someone to be feared, because you need to listen very closely. And I just want to give you a little anecdote in starting, because in the run-up to the 2009 Inclusive Government Cabinet, Paul and I had a little pact between ourselves. And the pact was that we would not, if we were ever made cabinet ministers, take a Mercedes-Benz. And we once raised that in a caucus of our party, and the leader, Morgan Tsvangirai, turned around and said that, you know, Coltart, you're being very presumptuous. Who says that you'll be in cabinet in the first place? But anyway, that put me down to size. But when I went into cabinet in 2009, Inyati was one of the first to say, do you remember our pact? Don't you dare take a Mercedes-Benz. And shiveringly, with my legs shaking, I remembered that. And I'm going to come back to that theme just now in speaking this morning. I want to address two broad issues this morning. I'm primarily speaking to my fellow councillors, but I'm also speaking this morning to the civil society representatives who are here. Those of you who know me know that I follow a person who walked the shores of Galilee over 2,000 years ago. Not everyone has the same faith as me, but there are some aspects to that person's teaching which are relevant to us today. Those of you who followed his story know that he washed the feet of the people who followed him. He also taught that the first shall be last and the last shall be first. They are dominant themes in that person's ministry. And they've had a powerful impact on the entire world since he walked those shores. And they apply particularly to all people who seek leadership positions. And the first point I want to convey, particularly to our councillors today, is that we are elected to serve, not to be served. And I hope that That will be a dominant theme of the next 5 years. That we are here to serve the residents of Bulawayo, not to be served by the residents of Bulawayo. So, as we get elected as councillors, we are not here to see what stands we can get for ourselves, or what benefits we might be able to get for ourselves by virtue of our positions. I have watched with astonishment and a sense of being deeply appalled in the last 20 years as the opposition in control of this council has used its collective position to get preferential access to stands and other benefits, and in so doing have completely demeaned the office of councillor and the city council, and have also undermined what we stand for in the opposition in this country. We stand for being something different to the regime which has governed this land for 40 years. And if we get into office and we do exactly the same as them, we don't just undermine the political party we represent, we undermine the very notion of democracy in our nation. And we undermine the people we should love, our children, our grandchildren, the underprivileged in our society. And it has to start with us. If we don't demonstrate a different standard of leadership, how can we possibly expect a different standard from others? I'm not going to name names this morning, but I'm aware that there are even some of those who've been recently elected who may be of that mindset, who may be seeing the next 5 years as a time of opportunity for themselves. Well, I need to say, and it starts with me, that for so long as the good Lord gives me breath, I am going to rally against that, because we need to set a new standard. We need to commit ourselves to this notion that we are going to serve, we are not going to be served. There are policies in place where councillors get one stand per 5 years. I've no problem with that. It's an onerous task, but that's where it has to end. And we have to have total transparency. And we need to have deep introspection to see that if we are trying to get on particular committees so that we get a benefit for ourselves, then that has to end. And I want to make certain commitments to you today, just starting with myself. It's partly because Inyati is here. Paul, I came here in a black Mercedes-Benz this morning, I'm sorry. But it's been with the council for about 9 years. Okay? I'm captured, yeah. But what I'm undertaking to you in the presence of these witnesses is that car is sufficient for my entire term. Right? I'm not going to get a new mayoral vehicle for the 5 years. This has been recorded. You can bring this back to me, okay? Unless it totally breaks down and unless we have got our full complement of ambulances. How can we have new mayoral vehicles when we only have 5 ambulances, when we should have 30? And it's just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And we've got 4 fire engines. And yesterday I had a meeting with the town clerk. He tells me we've only got 6 functional refuse vehicles. We need a minimum of 11. How can we be thinking? We've got a serious task ahead of us. So it starts with me, but I want to see that reflected in you. And we need civic society to back us up on that, to help us in this exposure and accountability. We really can't be serious about our business unless each one of us commit ourselves to this foundational principle. And sorry, I sound like a stuck record, but we are here to serve, not to be served. And it starts with us as councillors, me as mayor, the deputy mayor, the chairs of our committees, and flows down from that. When we set that new standard, then I think we can expect more from the employees in the council, and certainly from residents. So that's the first point this morning. The second point I want to raise in the context of the feeling that I have at present of being, quite frankly, thoroughly daunted by the prospect of trying to sort things out. I don't know about you, fellow councillors. I've been utterly sobered following the briefings that we had on Thursday and Friday. I've just mentioned some of them. 5 ambulances, we need 30. 4 fire engines. 6 refuse trucks to cover this entire city. What we saw at those sewage works. We have massive, massive problems that we have to face. Where do we even start? And if you read the Chronicle this morning, I mean, this appalling article by Moyo, basically triumphant against me, saying, you're a ceremonial mayor, you have no power, and we will show you. In the context of what I said last Monday, where I said we need to act in the interests of the residents of this city, that we need to act in a non-partisan way. I get that nonsense back from the Chronicle, not even from ZANU-PF. And I hope the Chronicle is here today. I hope the editor is ashamed with himself, and Mr. Moyo likewise. Are they really interested in the interests of our city? So where, in this context, with all these problems, where do we start? Well, I think we need to start with ourselves. I'll go back to Paul's point. If we are reliant on central government, we're not going to achieve much. Because it's clear to me that the attitude is to try and undermine us and undercut us. I hope that's not my attitude towards central government. I indicated to the town clerk yesterday that I want to meet the new Minister of Local Government. I seriously want to work with government as best I can, not in my own interests. I don't particularly like this regime, as you know. But I have an obligation to the residents to get things done. But if they're not going to cooperate, then how do we move forward? And we move forward, and this is the second theme, through self-reliance. First thing I said today, we're here to serve and not to be served. The second thing I want us to take away today is self-reliance. And what does self-reliance entail? Well, ultimately, it means that it can't just be us councillors. We all have to work together. Civic organisations, businesses, residents, we have to determine, as Paul said, do we love our city? Are we all going to work as hard as we can to use our own energy, our own resources to start turning this around? And there are many things that we can do to start turning it around. The one thing is litter. I'm like Paul, I'm absolutely disgusted. I don't understand where it comes from. I remember 23 years ago when I was first elected as Member of Parliament for Nkete, how impressed I was going into people's homes in Nkete and Mgwanin. The poorest people's homes were spotless. There was a pride there. And that is still the case. Our poorest people have pride in their homes. Why isn't that demonstrated the moment we get outside our homes? And we need to develop a new culture. And that doesn't take any money. It just takes all of us having the same goal, the same outlook, the same energy to start with ourselves. You know, Gandhi said, we must be the change we want to see in society. It starts with us. We can't look to Harari, we can't look to another political party. It has to start with us. And we have to do this collectively. How do we work together to start tidying up the city? It doesn't take any money at all to tidy outside your own home, your own street, your own business, your own alleyway behind your business. It just takes organization and time. But that's where it's got to start. Then the second thing we have to do is we have to start obeying our own rules. We have bylaws in the city. They're good bylaws. There are bylaws against littering and dumping. And all of us can be policemen and women. I want to give you a little story. I was driving back from a meeting on Friday to my office in Belmont. And I was driving behind, I'm not going to mention the name of the company because I don't want to bring undue harm to them. But it was one of our security companies in the city, a well-known security company that prides itself in maintaining law and order. And as I drove behind this vehicle, the driver threw his rubbish out the window. I was furious. I overtook him and I stopped. And I said, you are meant to be an example. You're a security company. You're meant to believe in law and order. And here you are dumping. And I reported that person to his boss. Now, that's just one little action, but all of us can do that. It starts with us, our own example, and us all trying to enforce these anti-litter and anti-dumping laws. Then there are other little things. They are all little manifestations of how we've lost respect. Have you seen all the little roads that join main roads that have been made by residents because they want to take a shortcut? Let me give you a couple of examples. At 23rd and Hillside Road, you've got KFC there. A lot of people want to get to suburbs quickly, so by the traffic lights, they just drive across to get onto the road that takes them down to Winnie's Way. They literally drive over. You can see, there's a pathway there. Down on the Plumtree Road, near Lobel's Biscuits, on the corner, by the bridge, that bridge that crosses the river, someone has made a road there, and everyone just drives over right on the corner where it's dangerous. That is nonsense. We've got to get those concrete bollards back in. Now, I'm not saying that this is the be-all and end-all. These are little things that we have to start doing. We've got roads that are there for a purpose. The laws say we are only meant to drive on the roads created by the council. We should not be driving on roads that we have created, which are a menace to society, which can kill children. Those little things need to happen. And there are many other little things that we can start doing to restore law and order in our city. Let's talk about, in that regard, the vendors on Fifth Avenue. They are an eyesore. But having said that, I understand that they are often the poorest people. They are reliant on their vending for their income. And if we shut them down overnight, then we are going to damage their income prospects. And we can't be seen to be doing that because we have to have compassion on the poorest in our society. So how do we deal with that? Well, we've got to start speaking to them. We need a genuine dialogue with them. And then we need to urgently start looking at other areas that can be opened up where we can perhaps move them to. But ultimately, our goal has to be to restore the rule of law in our city, but in a compassionate way. So I'm not going to go into any great detail. I'm just sowing a seed, the seed of self-reliance. There is a huge amount that we can do to start turning the city around without support from central government, without a single dollar coming from central government. And mark my words, when we start to show that we are self-reliant, I know from my experience as Minister of Education that there are many institutions of goodwill in this country and throughout the world who will respond to that, to us showing pride for our own city and demonstrating self-reliance ourselves. Let me end with this. I want to repeat this. I cannot do this alone. My body, our body of councillors, we can't do this alone. The tasks are almost insurmountable alone. But I have absolutely no doubt that if we all work together through close cooperation, through robust debate, through transparency, and I commend the Bulawayo Progressive Residents Association for calling this meeting today. I hope it's just the start. We want close cooperation with you, close cooperation with civic organizations. We have nothing to fear from you if we are acting within the law, if we are serving, not being served. And I think that together we can overcome these huge obstacles. Siyabonga.
Laba abazizwa bengani kukhona abalokutsho pertaining to the presentation from uMeya wethu, uMeya Coltart. Bengicela ukubona ngezandla. Siqale ukuthi sixoxisane.
I just wanted to agree with what the mayor said in terms of changing our culture of doing things, particularly around the issue of cleanliness. There is no amount of money that you can spend that would be enough to clean the city of Bulawayo or any other city in Zimbabwe, as long as the culture of uncleanliness is as prevalent as we are seeing it today. That's what we need to address. So what council will need to do is to actively, continuously, and in a sustained way, engage residents with a view to changing our attitudes towards our environment. The idea that whenever my bin is full, I offload it go drainage. The idea that, let me give two other examples. For the males that are here, when there is a toilet, a public toilet, men, some of them here, they will walk towards the toilet. When they get at the door of the toilet, they pass the door and go behind and help themselves behind the toilet, not inside the toilet. That is an attitude, a culture problem. Most of us, we walk towards a bin carrying a banana, and then when we get to a bin empty, we throw a banana eceleni kwebin. That's what we do. So we need to change our culture, our approach, and that way we'll be able to save a lot of money. Otherwise, it is impossible to budget enough. Never enough. Even in the cities that were given as examples of Kigali and all those, it is the culture and not the budget that changed the situation. Let's focus on our culture. I thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just want to add on to what Mr. Ngobe had said already. But my worry is more to do with our penalties. When one person commits an environmental crime, I think State Council has to improve. If you go to the countries that were mentioned by Uwabu Nyat, the penalties for a person who commits environmental crimes, they are very stiff. They are very deterrent to such an extent that if somebody is caught on the wrong side of the law, they actually know that they're going to pay heavily. So the city fathers, please, we really need to ensure that you revisit our penalties for environmental crimes. And also the other thing that we have to do is, last time when we had a small city hall, we need to advocate and lobby for the establishment of environmental courts and tribunals with the qualified people who understands the magnitude of some of these environmental crimes that are being committed by our citizens. Then lastly, there's need to actually conscientize or raise public awareness on the importance of what? Keeping the environment clean. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I introduce my name is Komplan Naposa. I'm the Director of Matiband Institute for Human Rights and the Secretary of Zimbabwe Waste Reclaimers Project. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Mayor, for the call to clean Bulawayo. But I stand guided. I am of the view and the opinion that we will not clean the city if we do not integrate waste pickers or reclaimers. These are men, women, and young people that are picking, especially plastic waste, and reselling it to recycling companies to make a living. We currently in our database, we have over 830 waste pickers that we work directly with, who are picking an average of 150 kgs of plastic waste a month, and they are not being paid by council. They don't want to be paid by council. They are paid from their own enterprise. But we have a problem of statutory instrument 525 of 1979 before we got our independence, which tentatively outlaws any form of waste picking, because that statutory instrument says whenever a waste recipient, a bin is taken out of a premise or a household, it now belongs to the Bulawayo City Council, and no one then is supposed to tamper with it. So as long as we have that instrument, which is colonial, which is archaic, which does not represent the economy and does not speak to the secular economy that we want to build, then we will have a serious problem. So I'm advocating for an amendment of that statutory instrument, and also an amendment of our solid waste management system to integrate waste pickers and upcyclers, because they are a free service to the authority. Then lastly, we also need as a city to actively actively entice the recycling companies if we are to bring up the circular economy in the city. Because right now the problem that we have is that recycling companies are leaving Bulawayo, going to Harare. Most of them are now resident in Harare, and after they pick the waste, they have to transport it to Harare, which is expensive and it diminishes their returns. But if more recycling companies are resident in the city, if you establish incentives for recycling companies in the city, we build a circular economy, and we then ensure that we have a thriving economy. Our current projection is that waste pickers on their own, they are circulating about 2.5 million USD in the city of Bulawayo per year, and we are able to raise that to 7.8 million USD per year if we put affirmative action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm speaking now as a member of Civics, but also as a mother and a grandmother. One of the things which I think is really sad in Bulawayo is the way that the children's playgrounds in high-density suburbs, all over Bulawayo have been turned into maize growing in the summer, and all the equipment which was once there has all been gone as scrap metal. And children need childhoods, they need somewhere to play. And I'd like to recommend that if you have a playground near you, that as civics, and again, this is something we don't have to wait for central government or ratepayers' money, is to walk around and talk to households near where you live and find out how many children are living within a block or two, and get buy-in from the nearby residents and rent payers to turn that site back into a children's playground. It just requires slashing and And, you know, and then one can use scrap metal and old tires to put up swings and, you know, find someone who's prepared to volunteer and build a jungle gym or whatever it is. So let's try and reclaim children's playgrounds, which are currently maize fields. And also there are, you know, what we need to do is audit what it is the Bulawayo City Council actually owns, because we know a lot of that has been turned into sort of private benefit, including with the help of some of our previous councils. How do we reclaim City of Bulawayo property and put it back to work for all the residents of the city? And together with that, what about all of the youth vocational centres which used to exist once upon a time in the suburbs? And what can we do for youth vocational training at the level of high-density suburbs, where youth have no hope and they're all just drinking in Django and, you know, blowing their minds, you know, at this stage. There's so much substance abuse in the city of Bulawayo and so little hope for adolescents and young adults. And what can we do to turn that around?
As I said before, my name is Part01. I'm with Abacop Trust. I've got just two things to speak on. The one is investment in the city, but the first one is the rebranding of the city. In 2015, our cultural organization called Umhlahlo Wesizwe Sikamthwakazi had a visit to the then mayor, it was Martin Moyo, and we requested that when we, if we could rebrand the city of Bulawayo and make the city of Kings, Monica, meaningful, we asked that, gave an example, that we've got Princess Margaret Clinic, which is run by the council. We have got Queen Elizabeth Primary School, which is run by council. We then requested that all the suburbs that we have in the city are named after the Ndebele Kingdom, which is the Mthwakazi Kingdom, which was established by King Mzilikazi. We made a request to the city council, and we've been writing letters from 2015 almost every January, requesting that all the suburbs in the city reflect the city of kings and queens. That Mzilikazi suburbs be changed from just Mzilikazi suburb to reflect the title of what Mzilikazi means to us, the people of Bulawayo. Mzilikazi was a king. We request that Mzilikazi suburbs be called King Mzilikazi suburbs. We go to Lobengula, we do the same thing. We go to Nguboyenja, we write Princess Nguboyenja. As it is, we go to Njube, we give Njube the status that it deserves, Prince Njube Seba. We then, when we go to Magwegwe, Magwegwe was the chief, the Prime Minister in Lobengula's kingdom. We name Magwegwe suburb, Chief Magwegwe suburb. That way, we will then finalize the title which we give our city, the city of kings. If you go right through out our suburbs, our suburb is a heritage site. Our city, Bulawayo, is a heritage site by the way we named our city. But we have just left a small thing. If we can say King George School, we can say Queen Elizabeth Primary School, we can say Princess Margaret, why should we not say Princess Famona suburb? So that the people, when they get into the city, they then know who this city is and what it is. Then it's going to be easy for us to make our city a cultural hub. It's going to be easy for people to know our heritage as they come into the city. And our children will know what our city is. Then on the second side, I also want to speak to the self-reliance side of things, where we intend to help ourselves. I've worked for council before. I worked for council when council was still almost having all the revenue streams. When we were still doing the vehicles at the revenue hall. So I've got an understanding of the number of revenue streams that Bulawayo City Council used to have. And I know that if there are many revenue streams that are coming into council, the credit rating of a city, because it's easier for them to raise municipal bonds for capital projects and all that. But as Paul Temba said, it's not time to cry. So we need an alternative now that we're faced with the challenge of dwindling revenue streams, because most of the things have been taken out of the city council. So I want to know what mechanism the council has in terms of investment. Does the city council have a leeway to have an investment department like Zita or Stroke Zita or something, whether it's just part of Bulawayo province or the city? How much can the city go out of its way in terms of the legal framework that is there? Because we work in a country of laws that are done from Zimbabwe. And if that mechanism is there, then some of us are willing to be part of that process where we can then help raise funds for the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Director of Ceremony. I understand that it was supposed to be a last question, but it seemed to be a burning issue. And since I mentioned earlier on that I'm currently chairing the Finance Committee, the last speaker talked something that touched me, because honestly also it is in my vision to see a slant in the budget that we are going to have, to see a slant from the consumptive service budget to a more investment service budget. And currently we are currently in the process of crafting the budget for the city, and it is people like him who should come forward and participate in that budget crafting. This year is different. Stakeholders have been invited. Last Friday we had our first meeting, and we are still inviting more stakeholders. So I like the last speaker to come on board and make his submissions, and through his knowledge, I think we are going to take this city forward. Maybe just to comment, maybe also on some of the issues that were touched on. First by esteemed PT Inyati on his opening remarks. He had an honest conversation that at times we are longing for good service delivery, but as ratepayers we are not playing our part. Good service delivery, I understand, which will also be contributed by ratepayers who are paying on time and paying the full amount that we are owing. So currently we are sitting the highest suburb that is paying the most in the city of Bulawayo monthly is sitting on 46%. It's less than half of the collection, our collections. So as we are gathered here as the policymakers, I encourage each and every one of us to go back to our wards and have an honest conversation with the residents that let's pay our rates on time, because the service delivery that we desire, we want Bulawayo to go back to being the cleanest city in Zimbabwe, or even perhaps in the southern region. It will only come when we are working in hand and glove manner or setup. We are encouraging them to pay on time. Then also, I was touched by what PT Nyati also said. He talked about us as policymakers visiting some of the countries which are doing well, like Botswana, like Rwanda, like Kigali. It's of paramount importance that we do those capacity buildings for the policymakers. Some of the people might think that it's a waste of resources, but as policymakers, we come from maybe some backgrounds that might not be suffice to what
are the expectations of the city. So it's important that maybe we get well-wishers who will fund our trips to such places, and we capacitate the policymakers, that we as policymakers we are capacitated to perform the task that lies ahead of us. Again, I'm touched also by the confidence and the track record of our current mayor, Senator David Coulthard. I'm sure it will go a long way to invite the much needed investors to come into our city and assist in rebuilding the infrastructure that has collapsed. Senator David Coulthard, his mayor, mentioned that there is a raw sewer that we are no longer processing, the reclaimed water. That is vital to the upliftment of this city, with no doubt when we are able to even sell that reclaimed water, we'll make more money. That's a revenue stream that we can add to the already existing revenues to our city and reduce the burden from our ratepayers. So there is more work that needs to be done, especially centering around revamping our infrastructure, which is in a collapsed and dilapidated state. Let's come together as people of Bulawayo. Let's not have a negative attitude that policymakers are thieves. There are some things that need our collective effort, honest and frank conversation, that if you are not on board assisting one another, will certainly fail. And even if you put anyone, you will also pose that person for failure if you are not coming on board to work together. Let's work together. Let's build a smart transformative city as the theme of Bulawayo by 2024. On the issue of West cars that Maposa was talking about, it's of paramount importance that we revisit the bylaws that are no longer speaking to the times that we are now living in. We need bylaws which are speaking to our times, and certainly we are councillors who will certainly change those bylaws. We are listening councillors who will do our best on low-hanging fruits which doesn't require the intervention of the central government, such as changing a bylaw for our city. We are definitely going to do that. We are on the lookout, and also the renaming of the streets, that one shouldn't be an issue, because it's something that we can go to a meeting as the policymakers and agree on that. Certainly there will be changes with the vision of our Mayor David Coulthard and the support of his lieutenants who are as the councillors. On this note, I'll end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I'm not going to respond in any detail. I did indicate to the organisers that unfortunately I could only be here for a brief time. So I'm not going to respond to each contribution, but I do want to say that I've already found this an exceptionally useful meeting. I've come away with some fantastic ideas, not just in these open plenary sessions, but some of you who've spoken to me one-on-one, I've got some really good ideas. I'm working towards a meeting this coming Tuesday with business leaders so that we can try to mobilize the financial resources that we need. And I'm working with some of you here in the development of a paper to put to that meeting along with our councillors. So I will be taking into account some of the outstanding points that you've made. But would you please now forgive me and excuse me, I've got to get away. But I leave you in the trusty hands of our councillors. Thank you.
Siyabonga. Thank you. Simvumeleni umeya ukuthi us excuse mbijana, and then we continue with our deliberations.